few weeks ago I started a talk, and I talked a little bit about Reverend William Stainton Moses, otherwise known when he frequently wrote books as M.A. Oxon, so his books wouldn't be known who they were written by. William Stainton Moses is very important in the history of spiritualism, partly because his book Spirit Teachings and the other books Spirit Identity and More Spirit Teachings were at one time regarded as the Bible of spiritualism, although in fact they were more a record of one man's contact with spirit by automatic writing, where spirit would answer a series of questions he posed, and the major spirit being imperator. But he also got advice and guidance from others, but it was mainly about the nature of spiritualism that he communicated. Stainton Moses was actually born in 1839, and he was a very, very bright student, going through various schools to the grammar school at Bedford, where he won multiple prizes for his intellectual ability. And he went on from there to Exeter College, Oxford, which he entered in 1858 at the age of 19 or 20. He was just as successful at college as he was at school, except the pressure of the work he did and the work that he kept overworking at meant that by the end of his time there, he couldn't take his exams because he became so ill that he actually had a breakdown. And he was sent away for convalescence abroad, and he spent nearly a year travelling the continent around to St. Petersburg, and he spent 6 months at the old Greek monastery of Mount Athos with the Greek Orthodox monks there, apparently guided there and had a desire to stay there for that period of time while he rested, and he felt he was really influenced by that time. At the age of 23 he did come back to England, and he finished his degree, and he went to a curacy on the Isle of Man, and the rector of that curacy of that parish was not a well man, so he ended up taking over almost all aspects of running that church, and became closely involved with a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Spears, who became very committed spiritualists and were influential in the movement later on, and they became firm friends. During his time in that curacy, there was a smallpox epidemic, somewhat worse than our pandemic here now, where many people were dying in his parish. There was no doctor, and as he had some medical learning, he was acting as the village minister, the village doctor, and because there was no one to bury the souls who died, he was also the village gravedigger, and he worked very hard at that until after the epidemic passed. He decided he wanted to go to a quieter curacy, and he moved to Douglas, where he was closer to the Spears, and continued that friendship. He was successful as a curate in Douglas, but moved on at the age of 30 to another one in Dorset, a curacy in Dorset, where unfortunately he had a throat problem, which meant that he never carried on with his life as a pastor, because he couldn't really he couldn't spend the time speaking and talking as he might have done if he continued with that pathway. And he had to take convalescence and went to live with the Spears in London, becoming, when he recovered completely at the age of 32, he became the English master in University College School in London, a role he held till 1889. However, around this time, Mrs. Spears became very ill and took up an interest in spiritualism, and he was asked by her to read Robert Dale Owen's Debatable Lands, one of the early books on spiritualism by Dale Owen, who had written an earlier book called Footfalls on the Boundaries of Another World, about the discovery of spiritualism. And he wasn't actually interested in spiritualism, although he was by then under the influence of Spears. They were moving away from traditional religion, and his interest was changing, but he thought spiritualism was something which was a con, wasn't real. But because Mrs. Spears asked him to look at spiritualism, he actually started to become involved and looking at trying to find out if there was any truth, because it was to him a religious subject and he was interested in that. So he decided he'd start to go to he'd read Debatable Lands, and then he'd read other books. He read about D.D. Home, about Lord Adair, who was D.D. Home's benefactor, and Lord Adair recorded the private seances of D.D. Home. And then he decided that he would attend, now at the age of 33, started to attend some seances, first with a Lottie Fowler and then a medium Williams. And he went with Dr. Spears, and they made a record of what they saw. And at the same time, he suddenly discovered that he had some mediumistic powers of his own. And these were put down on record and appeared in Light, which is the magazine of the what is now the College of Psychic Studies, but was founded by Stainton Moses. And his particular abilities developed to be a variety of raps which could appear simultaneously from different places, and each rap seemed to have a different sound, a different distinct personality behind it. And those raps could also develop as a second one into an ability to answer questions coherently, and people could tell who was making the responses because each of the raps sounded different, and some of the raps could be like a footstep going round and round the room. Lights would appear in his presence too, and they noticed that these lights wouldn't show any radiance around them, so there would just be a light showing, and he could get all kinds of lights appearing around him. All of this was being done in sufficient light to see the other members of the seance. When he was there, sometimes scents would appear, so people could recognize particular perfumes, musks, new mown hay, other scents. Musical sounds would appear, and in fact he noted that when it was the higher spirits, the raps would sometimes disappear, and they'd announce their presence by either a flare of light or the sound of a musical sound, and they'd be a frequent occurrence at his seances. He also had obviously the direct writing, which is how spirit teachings was written, where he would pose questions, or other people would, and they would write a message, and sometimes these would just be messages given to people in the circle. He could move tables, so there would be movement of tables, chairs, and other items would move, so sometimes there could be extremely heavy tables that would move. At times he would also achieve the rare feat of matter through matter. And things would appear from other rooms, apparently almost like an apport. An apport is something which moves from one room to a place, or a flower that appears on a table. They're rare gifts, the real apports. There's a lot of cheating apports done, but a real apport is a rare gift, and he would get those in his presence. He'd also get the direct spirit voice, as opposed to the voice of a spirit speaking through the medium. So in trance he could sometimes achieve direct voice, the sort of work that Leslie Flint and others like Etta Wright were able to do. And he was very competent with inspirational addresses, so he would happily do addresses while in trance, inspired by his guides. So the man himself was quite a remarkable medium, especially for a man who'd started life as a Methodist minister. He was also involved in the formation of various societies. He was the forerunner of the Spiritualist National Union of Great Britain, was the British National Association of Spiritualists. and he helped to found that in 1873. He was connected with the Psychological Society of Great Britain, inaugurated in April 1875, on which another famous researcher, Edward Cox, a compatriot of William Crookes, was involved. He also took an active interest in the formation of the Society for Psychical Research, and in 1884 he established the London Spiritist Alliance, which has become the College of Psychic Studies. It was his first president, and he filled that post up to the time of his death. The last few of the years of his life, he added the duty of the editorship of Light, which is still something that is well worth reading, and you can find quite easily the archived copies online, and of course it's still in production to the College of Psychic Studies. So far, a very, very remarkable man who was a powerful force for spiritualism and introducing spiritualism to people. And the rare part of it is the material he produced. His work was very different to Silver Birch. Silver Birch was more about our life and how it fitted with God and how life was for us. He was more interested in why. What did Spirit want? And the first part of that was, the first question he asked them was about why they brought this new revelation, the new revelation of life after death, of communication with Spirit. And they described it as a new revelation, and his question to them was, this new revelation of which you speak, is it contrary to the old? Many people don't understand that. And their response to him is, revelation is from God, and that which he has revealed at one time cannot contradict that which he has revealed at another, seeing that each is, in its kind, a revealing of truth, but of truth revealed in proportion to man's necessities and in accordance with his capacities. That which seems contradictory is not the word of God, but in the mind of man. Man was not content with the simple message. He has adulterated with his glosses, overlaid it with his deductions and speculations. And so as years go by, it comes to pass that what came from God is in no sense what it was. It has become contradictory, impure and earthy. Which is an important point, because if you think about it, there is one God, and what we see now around us are a multiplicity of approaches and ideas of what God is, often totally contradictory, and sometimes creating immense areas of aggression, of problems in the world, which really have nothing to do with God. And they went on to say, did anyone who brings a new revelation ever get accepted? Clearly, was Jesus accepted? All the way through, they say, look at the way mankind has changed the idea. And they went on in the Spirit teachings to talk about the God idea on page 94. We frequently said God reveals himself as man can bear it. It must needs be so. He's revealed through a human medium and can only be made known in such measure as the medium can receive the communication. It is impossible that knowledge of God should outstrip man's capacity. Were we now to tell you, if we could, of our more perfect theology, it would seem to you be strange and unintelligible. We shall by slow degrees instill into your mind so much truth as you can receive, and then you will see your present errors. But that is not yet. Indeed, since the conception which each frames for himself is to him his God, it cannot be that revelation can be in advance of capacity. It is in the nature of things impossible. And again later on they go on to say, if you say our teaching tends to show that there is no such thing as absolute truth in such matters, we can but express our thankfulness we've so far made ourselves intelligible. No doubt there is for you in your present imperfect state no such thing as absolute truth, as there is no such thing as absolute perfection. You surely do not expect that your eye can gaze undimmed into mysteries which dazzle the visions of the highest intelligences. Surely you do not hope that your circumscribed mind can grasp the infinite and incomprehensible, that which to us in the remotest cycles shall still remain a subject of adoring wonder. So, they're important points, because we often think we have a perfect idea of what religion is, of what God is. And another talk I did earlier from my own guide, Tao Seng, he suddenly reminded us that God is of the universe and not of us, not of our planet. But mankind could not conceive that, even in the generation that Stainton Moses wrote. So I think we can expect more revelations as God reveals more of himself to us, and of what we might be and what we might conceive to be. Hopefully in those revelations we'll find, all of us, our way to one true God, so that we can stop one of the areas of conflict in our world and find another place where we can all be more together. I thank you.